I'm attorney Phil Jusino, and this is WLINY's Finding Common Ground here on Altice. This show can be seen every Saturday at 10 a.m. on Channel 115, and also Thursdays for your insomniacs, 1 in the morning on Channel 20. Got a great show planned for tonight. The first topic will be free speech. That says it all. The second topic will be frequently asked questions. That will cover criminal law, family law, divorce, and personal injury. And the last topic, we always finish with American Exceptionalism. The two names will probably not be familiar to you. They are Sybil Ludington and Armand Shah. So let's get right to it. When we talk about free speech, what are we really talking about? We hear it all the time. Free speech, I believe in free speech, don't infringe. The Bill of Rights, which was ratified in 1791, which is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, had the First Amendment, which talked about freedom of speech, religion, and so on. I'm going to read it to you very quickly. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech. There it is. It's mentioned right there in the First Amendment. Or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the court to redress grievances. So when the Constitution was enacted in 1787, it didn't have the Bill of Rights. A number of years later, in 1791, the Bill of Rights was created by the same group of men that came up with the Constitution, and they realized that they needed to tweak it a little bit. And this was their way to do it, but freedom of religion, the press, and speech was so important, they put it in the First Amendment. So what is free speech? I want to give you some examples. Okay. Some of the examples are as follows. To use offensive words. So if you curse somebody out, that's protected speech, believe it or not. Now, there's some exceptions. If you do it on a television show, internet radio, believe it or not, you can curse. Regular TV, you can. Or if you publish something in Newsday using a foul word, that's not necessarily protected. Curse words are protected. To criticize or insult. If you call somebody any horrible name you can think of, that is protected speech. There are exceptions. If there's an order of protection and you call somebody on the phone and you say you blankety blank, that's in violation of the order of protection. All right? So free speech there would not be extended to that individual. Think about President Trump for a second. The things that man is called. He's a Hitler, he's misogynistic, he's a racist, all the horrible things. A comedian held a severed head in effigy. That is considered protective speech. The other one, the court found to wear black armbands to protect the war. That was during the Vietnam era. That was considered protective speech. It's not just speech, it's also conduct. Another one would be to advertise commercial products. So Pepsi can do a commercial, say buy Pepsi. Right? That's protected speech. Another one, you could have other types of symbolic speech, which we talked about, the severed head, things like that, or to contribute money to a campaign. If I support Donald Trump, or if you support Hillary Clinton and she was running for president, you could write a check. There are certain exceptions, but you're allowed to do that. Now, what is not protected? What's not protected is speech that would be considered inciting a riot or to do harm to a person. So I can't say, I'm going to kill you. That is not protected speech. I could be charged with harassment or aggravated harassment, depending on whether or not I do it to their face or on the phone or what they call electronic means. I can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's not protected speech. Obscene material, child pornography, that is not protected speech. To burn draft cards, to go against the war, let's say in Vietnam, men burned their draft cards. That was allowed. So those are things which are considered protected speech, and the ones I just gave you were not protected speech. I'll give you an example. Burning the flag. Burning the flag is protected speech. There are other issues. If you do it in a building, it could be considered arson, but that is protected speech. Kneeling. We all know about the kneeling issue. Football players kneeling, and other people in other sports. I don't think it happened in basketball or hockey or baseball, but I know some soccer players, some high school students did it. Kneeling during the playing of the national anthem. That is considered protected speech. Now we're going to get to, in a little while, the difference between the government, which they can't make those laws restricting free speech, and a private entity like myself or the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. Right? So we'll get to that in a second. Now, I strongly believe in free speech. It's the bedrock of this republic that we live in. Right? There are other countries. You go to the Middle East and you speak out against a politician or you say certain things, you don't have free speech. Even in other countries, I've read, even in France or in the Netherlands, if you say certain things against certain types of people, I think if you criticize, let's say, the president, or if you go to some countries and you criticize the king, there are consequences. Right? Now, in 1906, an author by the name of Evelyn Beatrice said, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." Now, that says it all. Right? And I firmly believe that, and that's very powerful. And how do you combat speech that you find offensive or that you disagree with? And I hear it every day. I turn on the news, and I might hear somebody on the far left say something negative about the president, or we don't need to build the wall, let's say. Right? Now, I may disagree with that, or they may say something that I find offensive. Do I move to shut them down, or to have them fired, or to be silenced? No, not at all. I'm a firm believer in free speech, and I have to be consistent. Not just speech I agree with. How do you combat, again, speech you disagree with or you find offensive? More speech. You speak out. I'm speaking out now. When I do my live show on Fridays on Facebook Live and YouTube, 8 o'clock, I sit in the same chair. It's a live show. There's interaction. People can put up on a chat room things they agree with or disagree with. So I am speaking. Now, I have a show. Not all of you have a show. How can you combat speech you disagree with? Very simply, go to Facebook. Go to Twitter. There are a whole bunch of social media outlets where you can state your opinion and have it seen by many, many people. Right? So, for instance, I have about 2,700 Facebook friends. When I do a post, and I know not all of them will see it, but many may see it. They may disagree. When they disagree with me, they let me know. When they agree with me, they let me know too. And often, kind of like a rebel rouser, I'll say something, and then people will agree, people will disagree, and all of a sudden, there's a disagreement between other people other than me. But that's fine. This is America. That's what I love about America. You can speak out and not be punished by protected free speech. And a true patriot, and I really mean this, a true patriot welcomes all forms of speech. Except, again, not child pornography or not things like that, but all types of free speech. Give you another example. If you watch The View, Joy Behar or Whoopi Goldberg, they say things sometimes that the right feels is outrageous. Just like when maybe Sean Hannity says something, the left may find that offensive or outrageous, and that's fine. You're allowed to. I don't ask for Whoopi Goldberg or Joy Behar to be fired or to be silenced. Many people do. I realize that. I don't. I want them to speak. I love it when Chuck Schumer gets up there, whether it be before a camera on the Senate floor or outside his office or wherever. I love to hear him speak. I disagree with most of what he says, but I like to hear him speak. Or when Hillary Clinton speaks, that's free speech. So we know how the other side thinks, and they know how we think. If you watch my show on Fridays, which sometimes delves into more of the political, you will know where I stand on certain issues. And again, that's fine too. I don't protest Joy Behar should be fired. Let her speak her mind. Her boss or the executives of that channel that run that show, it is their decision. And if she's making money for them, I suspect she'll stay on the show. If she's losing money for them, and I'm not calling for her sponsors to be contacted and ask for her to be fired, either Whoopi or Joy Behar. Because again, that's free speech. I don't think that would be fair for me to do that. Now, I want to give another example of free speech. When I was in college, I went to Fordham University, I studied finance, and I was the president of the Republican Law Students Association. We had two law organizations. One was the Republican Law Students, one was Themis, which is more Democrat. But I was the president. And Jesse Jackson, we all heard of the Reverend Jesse Jackson, a liberal man. He ran for president a number of years ago. and he's also very close with other liberal pastors. Right? And he came to Fordham University to speak. Al Sharpton, for a second I forgot his name. But he's also very cozy with Al Sharpton, who's also another liberal person. I think Al Sharpton is a race baiter, but that's just my opinion. Again, free speech. I'm allowed to say that. You could disagree. So Jesse Jackson comes to Fordham University to speak, and it's all advertised all over the campus. And what I do is I meet with the people that are in my organization, the other members of Republican Law Students Association. And we walk over, I don't want to say march, I don't want to make it look like it was something different. We walk over to where he was speaking, a big hall. And we got our seats, we sat down, and we listened to what he had to say. We didn't bring signs, we didn't protest, we didn't shout him down, we didn't throw anything at him. That would have been rude and un-American. We didn't do that. We listened to what he had to say. He was allowed to have a forum. Again, this is America. That's the beauty of America. He could speak and say things that I disagree with 99% of the time. We listened to what he had to say, and afterwards, we spoke amongst ourselves and we talked about the issues, where we stood on the issues. Now, not everybody in RLSA, that was the premier law organization on campus. So there were people that were Democrats that joined, and that's fine. And I didn't want to make them feel like outsiders. So we just discussed it. It was almost like, I don't want to say a mini debate, but we just exchanged ideas, talking about what Jackson had said. There might have been a couple that agreed with some of the things he said, and some of us didn't. But why is freedom of speech so important? Why, as I call it, the bedrock, one of the freedoms, liberty of America? Why is it so important? Because it allows for the freedom of expression and the exchange of ideas related to every facet of our society, every facet. Education, the arts, business, politics. And when I say freedom of speech, it's not just the speech. Remember I said before, conduct? So if you want to dress up as a woman and walk around, you can do that. That's a whole other show. But you can do that. If you want to wear an offensive, stupid shirt, you can do that. Again, there are certain norms that you have to comport yourself with. You can't have a picture of child pornography on your t-shirt. That would be against the law, and rightfully so. But the exchange of ideas, if you go to school and a teacher says something, you should be able to say something different. It could affect your grade, and again, that's another show. We've talked about that before, where many colleges are liberal bastions, where, God forbid, you say, I support some of the things Trump supports. It could hurt your grade, you could be ostracized, you could be shouted down. Now, many countries, as I said before, do not allow for free speech. You go to some of those countries and you speak out, you can be fined, you can be imprisoned, you can be murdered. Now, is freedom of speech under assault? Now, when I was thinking about this topic, I thought about many of the times I put something on Facebook, and there's usually one guy, I won't mention his name, and he's like, what's the big deal? Why are you bringing that up? Is freedom of speech under assault? And the answer, I think, is yes, in two ways. One is by the private sector, which is not the government, but many conservatives that try to speak at a college campus are shouted down. I've seen news footage. I've read accounts. They are shouted down. They are told to shut up and sit down. They are made fun of. And college presidents often will say, well, you can't speak here. We're not saying you can't speak here, but we can't keep you safe. That's a cop-out. They should spend as much money as they need to allow that conservative to speak, just as they should spend as much money as necessary to let a liberal speak. Just like when Jesse Jackson spoke at Fordham. There were no riots, but now you see that. Antifa or different organizations will shout that individual down, call him un-American or her un-American. So, and also town hall meetings. I've seen politicians give town hall meetings where they go back home. Let's say it's a congressman in Washington, D.C. They go back home and they speak about the issues, and I've seen them get shouted down by their constituents. They start talking about the Affordable Health Care Act. They get shouted down. That's wrong. Now, where else is it shouted down? Or where else is it under attack? There is a congressman from California named Ted Lieu, L-I-E-U, and he was on Greg Gutfeld the other day. And he said, if I could, I would restrict free speech. Now think about that for a second. You're a United States congressman, right? One of 435, right? Then there's 100 senators. So Congress, our governing body in the United States, consists of 535 members. You would think that when they raise their right hand and they say, we will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, just like the president does, you think they would mean it. But they don't. I don't want to say, I wish I could restrict free speech. Again, that's not patriotic. That is un-American, and I say that strongly. And I say it to both sides, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Conservative, Liberal. And my question to someone like Ted Lieu would be, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? And I think the answer is they're afraid of ideas that don't gel with how they believe. So for instance, they believe that the wall, as Nancy Pelosi said, building the wall on a southern border is immoral. Nancy Pelosi said that. And that is her opinion. She's allowed to say that. I disagree with that. But someone like Ted Lieu would say, well, I wish I could restrict the speech of people on the right to say that it is moral to build the wall, or it is proper to build the wall. That's free speech that he would like to restrict. Now let's talk about free speech and President Trump. Now there are a lot of people out there, and they say to me, that they don't like when he tweets. I've heard it from the left and I've heard it from the right. And sometimes I have a point where he says something where I say, you know what, maybe he shouldn't have tweeted that. Now he uses Twitter, I think, more than Facebook. I don't really know if he's on Facebook much because I only see him on Twitter. And he tweets about what he's thinking. So as long as it's not anything confidential or against the law, he's allowed to do that. Remember FDR, the fireside chats? I wasn't around then, but I've read about that. And some presidents use the bully pulpit. When Kennedy came about in national politics, he used television. That's why when he had the debate with Richard Nixon, if you heard it on the radio, they said Richard Nixon won. If you saw the television debate, John F. Kennedy won. And why is that? Because he was more photogenic. He used that media to his advantage. And that's fine. Would someone criticize John F. Kennedy and say, you know what, he took advantage of TV and it raised his profile? No. It was a legal medium and he used it. Nixon should have, he refused makeup. And Kennedy had the makeup, he looked better. Nixon was sweating. So these are examples where people use what they can to get the word out. Right? When Kennedy and Nixon were around, or even Ronald Reagan or Bush, they didn't have Twitter. They didn't have Facebook. That came out later. So they used whatever they could. Some presidents love to go before the TV camera, and they would call for the opportunity at every turn to have a press conference. Some did it a lot, some don't do it as much. President Trump is a firm believer in free speech, almost to his detriment, and maybe to his detriment on occasions. For instance, some presidents, I remember watching Ronald Reagan sometimes, he'd get off the plane or a helicopter and they would shout questions. He'd be like, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. That was his way of, not today. There might have been times where he legitimately couldn't hear, but that was one of his defense mechanisms to say, I really can't hear what's going on. Trump would stop and engage, in a sense, the enemy, what he would call the news media, and sometimes the fake news media. And he would call them out. I remember I went to hear him speak one time. Actually, I've seen him speak 3 times. And 2 were more measured. They had the little screen that he reads from, teleprompter. So it wasn't really so much engaging the crowd. The other one he did. But when you watch it, he would say, fake media, fake media. That's another form of free speech. In other countries, maybe that's not allowed, although the media is usually much, much weaker than the politicians. But that might not be allowed to say fake news. He's allowed to do it. I'm allowed to do it. You're allowed to do it. And he has been one of the most, I'm going to say the most transparent president. And yes, because of social media. We didn't have that for a lot of the other presidents. Even with Obama, we didn't have the use of Twitter and Facebook like it is today. And then we have Instagram and a whole bunch of other things. Some of the things I don't even probably know about yet with the younger kids, the millennials, and even younger, know what that's all about. Now, if you don't like what the president says, or any politician, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Kirsten Gillibrand, you are allowed to speak out and condemn what they say. And if anything, sometimes it goes too far. There are people that say, I wish the president would be assassinated, or I wish the president or his family would be killed, or someone would shoot him. They actually say that. Now, I think that goes over the line, because there are people out there that are nutty, and they hear that and say, oh, it's a call to action. Somebody wants me to shoot the president, which is a crime, and should not be done, and should not be even spoken about. Not, let's say, in social media. And I suspect when people say things like that, the Secret Service pays them a visit. We might not know about it, but the Secret Service may knock on their door and say, what do you mean? You said this should happen to the president, or that should happen to the president. That is speech that is not protected. But anything else is fair game. You've heard, I said it earlier, you've heard President Trump called Hitler and all horrible names. You're allowed to do that. He has to accept it. Now, he can combat it and say that's not true, and the person who said it is a socialist, or they're not patriotic. He can come back with more speech. That's what I said earlier. You have free speech, and you combat speech you disagree with or find offensive with more speech. You speak. And in our society today, we have the ability to do it more than ever. Right? Like I said, not everybody can have a show like I have. Right? But there are things you can do to get the word out to sometimes as many people, if not more. You go to Facebook and you see these people that have 4,000 followers. Or you hear the expression, it goes viral. What does that mean? It means many, many people clicked on to that post or that tweet, where maybe 1 million people saw it. I did a show on the live version the other day about this kid. I think he was like 8, 9 years old, whatever he was. And he was making millions of dollars because he had a YouTube show where he would play with a toy and talk about it. Now again, that's a form of free speech. You're allowed to do that for commercial purposes. Now there might be some countries where you can't. Like I know, for instance, we can talk about someone who's arrested, let's say. You can form an opinion. You can say, I think the guy's guilty. Well, look what that guy did. He did that to so-and-so. In certain countries, in other countries, I think in England, maybe France, you can't do that until the person is convicted. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, again, that's for another day. But it shows the breadth of free speech that we follow in this country. You can say almost anything, and it's protected. Right? But the bottom line is let them speak. Right? And that's a good way to do it, because when you hear people that you disagree with, you can use that almost like as a teachable moment. You could say, and I do this all the time on my shows, Hillary Clinton said this, or Joy Behar said this, or Paul Ryan said this, and this is where I disagree. And we talk about it. Right? And the people on the right, they want to hear what the people on the left say. They should. Like, for instance, there are certain channels I don't watch as frequently. And maybe I don't watch MSNBC all the time. But I'll turn it on occasionally because I want to hear what the other side has to say. Right? And that's fine. Now, the thing I like about free speech is I can say, and I repeat this a lot, but this is the central premise of this whole segment. I can say what I want, what I feel is right. I go to court often. I'm an attorney. And a lot of people come up to me, could be other attorneys, could be clerks, court officers. They honestly do. And they say to me, hey, Phil, I love your posts. Keep it up. And I joke and I say, why didn't you hit like? And they're like, well, I don't want to get in trouble, or I'm afraid if I do that, someone will accuse me of being pro-Trump. And my answer to that is as follows. So what? This is America. Are you afraid of saying something that might be supportive of Hillary Clinton, Paul Ryan, Bernie Sanders, President Trump? Why be fearful? Right? If you're good at what you do, it shouldn't matter. If you're an excellent judge or an excellent court officer or an excellent clerk or an excellent attorney, people should want to use your services no matter what your political beliefs are. I always use the example. If I'm in a plane and lightning strikes and there's one engine and a wing's falling off, I don't care if it's a Republican, Democrat, Muslim, Jew, Catholic, Baptist. I don't care. I want the best person, best pilot sitting in that seat. Remember Sully when he landed the plane on the in Manhattan on the Hudson, Miracle on the Hudson, right? Did it say Sully, the Republican, or Sully the Democrat? No, Sully the pilot. They might have talked about his training in the military, but he did the right thing. Now, quickly, I want to go back to something where I said government as opposed to private. The government can't make a law that says you can't kneel during the national anthem. That would be unconstitutional. But the owner of the football team, let's say the Dallas Cowboy owner, or the owner of the soccer team where someone's trying to kneel, or even, well, I don't want to get to a public school, private school just yet, but in the example, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys can say, fellas, you're not allowed to kneel. Can he do that? Of course he can. Why? Because he owns the team. And it's not a governmental agency. It's the Dallas Cowboys. It's a private entity. Or the coach, as long as he has the backing of the owner. The coach can say, no kneeling. If you kneel, you're not going to play. And there were coaches that said that. There were coaches that allowed it. The league can impose a fine. If that's part of the collective bargaining agreement where they can impose certain fines for conduct, they're allowed to do it. So a private entity, I can say to my employees, you're not allowed to say this, or you're not allowed to say that. I can do that. I'm not abridging on their free speech. In a sense I am, but I'm a private entity, I'm not the government. The difference also is with a public school and a private school. A private school can do things differently than a public high school, let's say, or a publicly funded college. A private school can say, you can't speak about that. So the next two segments, we're just about done with segment one. The next two segments, we'll talk about frequently asked questions covering CPS, criminal law, family law, personal injury. Stick around for that. And the third segment will be American Exceptionalism, where each week we talk about a different topic. Some people you heard about, some you didn't. Here are two, I'm going to call them kids. One was 16, one was in 5th grade, that did things that would be considered exceptional. And they're exceptional Americans. So stick around for segment two. Welcome back to Finding Common Ground here on Altice. This is the section I call Frequently Asked Questions. We're going to cover family and divorce law. We're going to cover criminal law as well as CPS and personal injury. So let's get right to it. First question, what do I do if I want custody of my child or children? Here in New York, if you want a court order that you can enforce, because you could always work out a deal with the other parent, whether it's a spouse or whether it's somebody you had a child with, you could always work out a deal, no problem. But if you want it to be a court order where it can be enforced, you have to do something, take action. The action that you would take is to file a petition in family court. Whether you're married or not, you can go to family court for custody. Or if you filed for divorce, you can handle that issue in Supreme Court. Now let's talk about family court for a second. You file a petition, you say, I am the parent that provides the most care for this child, I'm the primary caregiver to the child lives with me and I want custody. You take that petition to family court. Now you could hire an attorney to do that, or you can do it yourself over in family court. You file that petition, you get a call in like a week or two, you take that petition that they process, then you have to serve the other party. The same thing if you start a divorce action. There's due process, and they have a right to be served, so you have to serve them process, which would be hiring a process server that would go to their house or their place of business and serve them the paperwork, whether it be a petition or whether it be a divorce action, summons and complaint, and then that person has to either get an attorney or show up to court by themselves at some point. Family court, the first time you'd show up to court. In Supreme Court, you'd have to respond to the summons and complaint. Then you get to court, and a whole process starts. The process would be, if you can't agree on custody, the court would appoint an attorney for the child. Even if it's a very young child, the court will generally appoint an attorney for that child. Last week on Altice, we had Jorge Rosario, who's an attorney for the children. He came on the show, we talked about it. I'm one, I used to be one 5 years, actually for 5 years, many years ago. Back in the 90s, I was an attorney for the child. Back then, they were called law guardian. So that attorney would speak to the child or children, if they can, if they're old enough, and the court would try to see if the case can be settled. If it can't be settled, the next step would be a trial, a hearing. If you need more information about that, it's always good to contact an attorney before you do anything, right? Because you want to make sure the petition says what it needs to say. A court could say, no, I'm not going to sign the petition because it doesn't make a prima facie case. So it's very important to make sure that petition is done right. You're asking for the right relief, right? It's almost like I've seen petitions where they don't even ask for custody. They just say the child lives with me, and they don't go to the next step. It's like not asking for the sale. Next question. What should I do if I get a letter from CPS? CPS is Child Protective Services here in Suffolk County. If you get a letter, that means that either somebody called CPS on you, or some entity called CPS, or they called it on the other parent. So you're the mom, let's say someone calls it on the father. You'll get a letter that says someone other than you is under investigation by CPS. There you don't have to do anything. If it says it's you, you may get a call from CPS. You may want to consult an attorney at that stage of the game. Now, just because you get the letter doesn't mean, in a sense, you're guilty. I'll use the word guilty, or that you're culpable. Because what happens is within 60 days after you get the initial letter that says you're under investigation, you're going to get another letter from the same entity, Department of Social Services. And they're going to say either indicated or unfounded. If it's indicated, you have to take action. You have to fight it within 90 days. If you wait beyond 90 days, you might lose the right to fight it. Now, not only could you be indicated, but you could be dragged into family court under a neglect petition, N, for neglect or abuse. If it's minor, you're not going to be dragged into family court. If it's serious enough, you would have CPS to deal with as well as family court. If it's unfounded, there's not a thing you need to do. You might want to know who did it. You're never going to find that out. You're never going to find out who made that phone call. Never. They don't divulge that information. But if it's unfounded, you're in the clear. If it's indicated, you got to fight it, because you're going to be on that registry, abuse and neglect registry, until your youngest child is 28 years old. And that could affect employment. That could affect adopting a child down the road. So you want to deal with it. Next question. Is my spouse entitled to my pension or 401k? The answer is yes, the marital portion. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're married to a police officer, you're the wife, and you're married to a police officer. And he became a police officer in the year 2000. And you married him in 2015. And now here we are, 2018, almost 2019. Do you get 50% of his pension? No. You get 50% of the marital portion of that pension. So from 2000 to up to the day before marriage, 2015, that's his separate property. A company that handles pensions will calculate his separate property. There's a thing called the Majaskis formula. That's just the law that they name it after, or the case, I should say. And Majaskis, there's a numerator and a denominator. So from 2000 to 2015, that's his separate property. From 2015 to now, or when the divorce is filed, the wife would be entitled to half of that portion. Right? Now I say when the matrimonial action was filed, because let's say the divorce was filed in 2018 and the case dragged on for 2 years. So here we are, 2020. Does she get it from 2015 to 2020? No. Unless they agree otherwise, she'll get it from 2015 to 2018, the marital portion. And then they do a quadro. Qualified domestic relations order would be the vehicle by which the wife, in this example, would get her property. Because even if the husband wanted to give her that, he couldn't unless a Supreme Court judge signed a DRO, domestic relations order, which becomes a qualified domestic relations order. Next question. When I go to family court concerning a child support proceeding, what documents do I need to bring with me? Very important, because if you show up to court without the documents, the court can't always give you what you need, or if you're on the other side, may hit you with an amount that's higher than you're making because you have no proof of what you're making. And the wife could say, oh, he always made 80. And the husband could say, yeah, he always made 80, but now I make 50. The court could say, where's your pay stub or your W-2 showing me you make 50? Well, I don't have it. All right, I'm going to make a temporary order based on 80,000. You come back next time with your proof. So what do you need? You need your most recent tax return, sometimes more than one if there's a reason why you want to show maybe your income spiked, but it's always been a lesser number. So you bring with you your tax return. You bring with you your W-2 or your 1099 if you are an independent contractor. And if it's more than one W-2, like some people work for a union and they have 3 different jobs during that year, W-2 or 1099 for the 3 entities. Then you need your financial net worth statement. That's usually mailed to you. It's 2 pages or sometimes 3 or 4 pages, depending on how the support magistrate handles that issue. Right? There are 2 versions. You have to fill that out completely, have it notarized. Usually if you have an attorney, the attorney's a notary, or somebody from his office is a notary. Have to have it notarized. So tax return, W-2, 1099, financial net worth statement, and generally 3 recent pay stubs. The reason why pay stubs are important is, let's say you go to family court and it's December. Well, the W-2 you have would be for the prior year because you didn't get it yet in December. So you might say, my income is not what it was last year. How do we know? If you have a pay stub for December or even October, November, December like that, you can extrapolate. You can calculate what you made so far, and assuming it's consistent throughout the year, sometimes it's not. Sometimes the person drives a plow and they're going to make a killing potentially December, not this past December, but December, January, February, where in the summertime they don't make as much. But a recent pay stub is a way to figure out what you made for the year. Like if I have a pay stub for my client that says the last week in December, perfect. It'll have a year to date. And I'll say he made 80 last year, but this year he made 60. Then the question becomes, why did he only make 60? Did he do something? Did he stop doing overtime? Did he stop working for a period of time? Did they ask to get paid less so it looked like they were making less, so when they go to family court? Those are issues that would come up. But the documents you would need are the documents I just told you about. Next question. What is wasteful dissipation of a marital asset? Now that issue would not come up in family court. That would come up in Supreme Court. Wasteful dissipation, I'll give you an example. Let's say a man gambles and he takes $10,000 out of an account that he has with his wife, even if it's only in his name, if it's marital. And that's, we talked about marital assets on other shows and we'll talk about it again. If it's marital, whoever's name it's in, doesn't matter. If it's marital, the husband takes the $10,000 out and he goes to the racetrack and he bets on a slow horse. And the horse comes in last, he loses his money, and the wife at some point says, wait a minute, where'd the $10,000 go? And the guy said, well, I bet a slow horse. The court, if they're in court, a judge can say that's wasteful dissipation of marital asset. What is the punishment? What is the remedy or the consequence? That husband would have to give the wife back $5,000 because he wastefully dissipated $10,000. 5. Now, sometimes it's not as clear cut. The guy takes the money and he burns it, or he intentionally gets rid of it somehow, or he gambles it away, as I said, or he gives it to his girlfriend or a friend. Let's say this guy has a girlfriend and he buys her a $5,000 ring. That's considered wasteful dissipation of a marital asset. He would have to give the wife back $25,000 in that example. Now, let's say a guy buys stock in a shaky company. It's up to the judge to decide, is it really wasteful dissipation or just a bad investment decision? It could be just that. You know, we've all, well, I shouldn't say we all, I buy stock and you hope they go up. Sometimes they don't. There was one, Washington Mutual, went out of business. Thank God I didn't have a lot of money invested in it. But that company went out of business. Was that wasteful dissipation? No. It was a reputable company I bought stock in. They went out of business. The return was 0. That would not be considered wasteful dissipation. Next question. Do I need grounds for divorce? You did at one time, years ago. You had to have constructive abandonment, meaning no sex 1 year prior to the commencement of the action, or adultery, or cruel and inhuman treatment. You needed that. It's still on the books, but you don't need that anymore, and judges don't even want to hear about that. You go with Domestic Relations Law, Section 177, subsection 7, which talks about irretrievable breakdown, which means you don't like the person anymore. Very, very low standard. Used to have trials if you disagreed. Didn't happen often. Or you could even have a jury trial. That was the one time you got a jury trial. We don't have that anymore. You don't need to allege cruel and inhuman, adultery. When you see that, it's usually spite, or there's some compelling reason. Maybe there's a prenup that says that the other side cheats. Then that's a different scenario. But for the most part, you don't need the grounds. You go with irretrievable breakdown. Next question. At what age can my child choose where he or she lives? You're not going to find that age in a statute. 18, of course, they're adults. There's not even a case anymore. 17 is like 18, but technically you could file a petition for custody for a 17-year-old. You don't see it that often. 16, 15. So there's no magic age. But the older the child and the more articulate the child, the more the child will have a say. If the child's 5, they probably won't even ask the child that question. A 16-year-old kid who says, I want to live with Dad, he understands me, he probably will be allowed to live there. And lastly, one other question, is there restitution in a criminal case? The answer is yes. Let's say you break a window. You get charged with a crime. The focus really isn't restitution, but it's a part of it. So if you get placed on probation, and even if there's insurance and the other person says, I'm out $1,000, the DA could say, we'll give you a deal, but you got to pay that $1,000. Or even if they don't give you a deal, probation can say you have to pay that $1,000. So that's considered restitution. You can still be punished for the act of breaking the window or damaging the other person's property. But I had about 10 or 11. We're not going to get through all of them today. Do we have time for one more? Quickly. Let's see. What happens if the police don't read me my rights? Generally speaking, the case can still go forward. That's the Miranda warnings. You have the right to remain silent. The case can go forward. There's a procedure that happens where the statement could be thrown out, but the case still goes forward. People say, he didn't read me my rights. Doesn't the case get dismissed? The answer is no. The statement could go bye-bye, but the case could still go forward. So that's the end of segment 2. Stick around for segment 3, American Exceptionalism. Welcome back to Finding Common Ground here on Altice. This section is what I call American Exceptionalism, very important. The last 15 minutes of my show I devote to Americans that are exceptional. It could be somebody famous like George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, or it could be somebody that you never heard of. Now, when we were in school, at least when I was in school, I don't know about some of you younger people might not have learned it the way I did, but there was a poem that said, listen children and you should hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. Did you ever hear the one that says, listen children and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Sybil Ludington? No. Now some of you may know who she is. She was a 16-year-old girl at the time of the American Revolution. Her father was a militia leader of 400 men. And she used to ride horseback, so she had those skill set, and that'll come into play in about 3 seconds. So on the night of April 26, 1777, she was called upon, she volunteered, very dangerous job, to ride and to warn the Americans or the militiamen that the British were coming. Now, it's interesting because I've done a lot of, I always say I'm a student of the Civil War, but also the American Revolutionary War. And Paul Revere is the most famous of the night riders. Right? There are other men. There was William Dawes. There was Jack Jewett. They also rode. But the most famous was Paul Revere. And if you go to Boston, you can see the Paul Revere House. He was also a skilled craftsman. And I believe he worked on the bell, the Liberty Bell. So he's the more famous. And he didn't even ride as far as Sybil Ludington. And also, they say, in my reading, that it's inaccurate about Paul Revere. Not that he didn't ride, but they said he wouldn't have said, the British are coming, the British are coming. The reason is that they were all British, for the most part. So he wouldn't have been riding around the countryside to the British. He would have said the army is coming, or the redcoats. More likely would have been the redcoats, which is what Sybil yelled. But here we are, April 26, 1777, and she hops on a horse, and she rode to alert militia forces of Putnam County, New York. She was a New Yorker, and through Danbury, Connecticut. And the ride was similar to the other rides I talked about, where she's alerting the militia that the redcoats are on their way. And she was born in Fredericksburg, New York, which is now called Ludingtonville, named after her. And she rode a horse. There's some discrepancy as to if it was really the name of a horse, named Star. And she traveled about 40 miles. And she went from Danbury all over New York through Connecticut. Now, prior to her famous ride, she saved her father from capture. He was a heroic girl. When a royalist named Ichabod Proser, with 50 other loyalists, tried to capture her father, she did something that's amazing. And I've read about this by great generals, how they used this same tactic to fend off the enemy. What she did was she put candles all around the house, and she organized her siblings. Think about this. At the time, she might not even been 16 yet, but about 15, 16 years old. And she got her, almost like something out of a movie, and she got her siblings together, and they marched in front of the windows of the house in military fashion, creating the impression that there were militia guarding that house. So the enemy said, that's probably not the best time to attack. The house is protected. Meanwhile, it was just her and her brothers and sisters marching in formation. Now, she allegedly rode 40 miles in the hours of darkness through Carmel, Mayapack, Kent Cliffs, to Farmer's Mill, and back home. She used a stick to prod her horse and to knock on doors. So she'd get close to the house, she'd use a stick, she'd knock on the door and yell out, the redcoats are coming. And she had to use that stick to defend herself against the highwaymen who tried to attack her. So her dad, you might think, what was he doing allowing this child, 16 years old, to ride? She wanted to do it by the reading of the article. And I guess her father felt that she was part of the cause. Back then, younger people were doing brave and amazing things to help the cause. Just like you might have heard about drummer boys or young kids in the Civil War, picking up a rifle or carrying the flag, 9, 10, 11 years old. But she was doing her part in this war. Now, the American militia arrived too late to save Danbury, Connecticut. But the start of the Battle of Ridgefield, they were able to drive General William Tryon, then the governor of the New York colonies, back. And his men to Long Island Sound, drove them back to Long Island Sound from the shoreline of Connecticut. And Ludington was congratulated for her heroism by the friends and neighbors, and also General George Washington. Now, what's interesting, accounts of her ride have been disputed in parts because it didn't come out right away. A brother of hers wrote about it, and we don't have the same news record we have now. Obviously, if this happened today, there would be cameras all over the place, or you'd see a Facebook post or a tweet. We'd know about it. Back then, you didn't have that. And the media wasn't organized the same way as it would be even in the Civil War or World War II, where you had cameramen. You know, Matthew Brady started to take photographs during the American Civil War. You didn't have that back then. And a 16-year-old riding around might not have been the same kind of news you would think. And maybe some of the soldiers didn't even want to mention it because, oh, you know, we were the brave ones, maybe not a 16-year-old girl riding around the towns. But the Daughters of the American Revolution said that because there was not enough evidence, they couldn't consider her a heroine. But the local chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, near where she lived, said there was enough evidence, and there was a statue. Did we put the statue up?
Oh, yeah.
All right. That's Sybil Ludington. And her ride started at 9 p.m., so think about it. Most of us would not want our daughters during this wartime riding around on a horse by herself anytime. 9 o'clock at night, very brave. But as I was just saying, in '96, the Daughters of the American Revolution said the evidence was not strong enough for the criteria of war heroine. So they removed the book about her. So I guess they felt strongly that not everything was accurate. Historically, there was a girl by that name, and apparently she did ride, but I guess they felt that some things could have been embellished. I don't know. But the local chapter said the story is true and simply too good not to be believed. Now, usually I do one topic. I'm going to do two tonight. There was a boy named Armand Shah from Florida, and he did some work for his uncle, a fifth grader, young kid. And with that money that he earned, he paid off the lunch debts of kids that couldn't afford lunch. And for that, he got a reward. He didn't set out for the reward, but Nike gave him custom-made sneakers. Now, he was asked, what prompted this? Why did you decide, instead of using the money to buy a video game or to go to the movies or something like that, why did you take that money and pay off the debts? It's almost like a person who goes to Target and pays off the layaway. But this is a kid. And it was money that he saved. And he said because he saw a documentary about lunch shaming. So I didn't see the documentary, but apparently he did. And it was about shaming kids or families that didn't pay their lunch bill. Now, this is an exceptional young man. Because when I was a kid, I was pretty industrious. But would I have taken that money? I'm very charitable now, but maybe as a fifth grader, I probably wasn't. Probably wouldn't have taken that money and say, you know what? I got some money here. I'm going to buy something. I'm going to save it, or whatever. This kid didn't do that. Now, I would hope that other young kids would learn from him, because there's a lesson here. First of all, he was altruistic. He did something for others, not himself. And he saw a need and he filled it. Now, you could say some of those other kids could have maybe worked to pay their lunch. That's the capitalist in me saying that. But maybe they didn't have the opportunity he had to work for his uncle. Maybe they didn't have that opportunity. So he did something amazing. And I consider, just like I consider Sybil Ludington an American hero or heroine, an exceptional American, I consider Armand Shah, great job. That ends segment 3. Listen, when you watch this show, all right, you may watch it in its entirety. If you don't get the chance to do that, what I'd like you to do is go to YouTube. If you type in WLINY Internet Radio on YouTube, there's a little blue disc with WLINY in it. That's the YouTube page for WLINY. You go to that, and it's cataloged. You can go to Altice shows. You can, this is I think 6 or 7. You can go to the live shows that I do that are now on YouTube, and you can catch those shows. Like when you go to Frequently Asked Questions, it's laid out where you can skip things to go to questions you want answered. So I did about 7 tonight, and you might want to focus in on 1 or 2 of them. You can do that. When you watch the live show on Fridays, you can hit share and like. I want to promote this show. I think it has value. Because people stop me in court, or they contact me and they say, look, I saw the show and it's very interesting. I learned something, especially the Altice version, because the other one sometimes delves more into politics, which also is informative. But here you really learn about the law, the institutions of the law. We talked about free speech. You learn about people that are exceptional. So I really want to thank you for watching this show, and you have a good day.